Yep, this exactly. So let me explain it. I know
Which
it's
is
very
complete
confusing.
nonsense.
So let me explain it. Let me explain it, Piers. So what people fail to realise is that when black people have to contend with racism, they can end up internalising it. And that can result in low self-esteem, self-loathing and rejection of one's community. And when you combine those feelings, which as we know are also referred to as unconscious bias, when you have those feelings and they are compounded by hierarchy and power, it can lead to an individual abusing said power and projecting their self-hate onto another. And this is why, in my opinion, why we see black and white police officers killing more black people than we do white. Reason why is because of racism, which includes internalised racism, Piers.
Right. I think that's complete nonsense.
You would, because you're a white man and you don't.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Brief. This week, we're discussing the murder of Tyrie Nichols, Bernie Sanders cashing out on anti-capitalism, and a YouTuber cures blindness. Let's jump in. Good morning, Brad. You look nice.
Yeah, I even put on a nice little shirt for this. One of my new ones from Christmas.
Aw, that's sweet. I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes I come in looking a little bit more dressed up and you're more low-key, but we flipped roles today.
Yeah. Oh, well.
streetwear.
Yeah, sometimes I do really be getting on this podcast in a sweatshirt or like a white tee, and then my boyfriend will roast me later. He'll be like, "What were you wearing?"
Okay, but no, a few weeks ago when I was having a day from hell and we had to record, I think you'll remember this, and I ended up in like a backwards baseball hat because I just like could not be bothered with hair and makeup. And people were roasting me in the comments because that week we were talking about something to do with like a lesbian reacting, and everyone's like, Hannah was like a lesbian this week. It was so funny.
I'm a fan of the backwards hat. I can't pull it off super well. Occasionally I'll do it, but so I have exciting news to share. My sister and I are almost at level 70 in World of Warcraft. We've been playing together. Level 70 is the max level. We're at level 68. So that's pretty exciting. If any people who watch this play WoW, let us know in the comments because we don't have anybody to play with. So the two of us just do it on FaceTime.
You're such a like gaming nerd, and I always forget that fact about you until you come out with
It doesn't. I guess I don't really give a gamer energy,
No.
but I do actually play a lot of games.
I remember when I was working at FEE, or we were both still working at FEE, and one of our other colleagues said something about some like very elaborate game you guys were playing. I was like, Brad's doing what?
State of Decay, yes, the zombie sandbox. Z, the president of FEE, also happened to be playing that game at the same time as me.
Yeah, all of this is like right over my head. I did try to watch that new show that's based on a game that everybody's obsessed with, like The Last
The Last of Us?
whatever. Thought it sucked.
I haven't watched it yet, so I don't know.
It kind of felt like watching a video game, honestly. Like, I did not get into it. But, well, I have what could be exciting news, but I don't know. I'm trying to keep my expectations level. I, as of right now, have jury duty for the first time ever in the morning. But I'm supposed to call at 5:30 p.m. tonight to make sure I'm still needed. And I have a good feeling they're going to scrub my social media and tell me I don't need to show up. But we'll see. I don't know.
If you do show up, you'll last about 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's what everybody says, and I think you're right. You know, from working on criminal justice reform, this was something that was surprising to me actually when I first got involved with reform, was that they want stupid jurors. Literally, like that's who they're after. They want the lowest common denominator on juries. They want people who know nothing about the law, nothing about the Constitution, who have no like strong ideas about justice. They definitely don't want people who know about jury nullification, which is where you can vote it.
When you go there, whisper to everyone, look
I know.
up jury nullification.
Like Google jury nullification. You remember those back in the day when Ron Paul was running for president? You'd see the "Who is Ron Paul" signs everywhere. Like, I'm gonna go with like signs like "What is jury nullification?" So I know I don't have very good odds of getting on a jury, and that's sad because I actually think that's an important part of like your duty as a citizen and making sure justice is allocated, not only to ensure guilty people are not on the streets, but to make sure innocent people don't get locked up or people don't get locked up for crimes that shouldn't be crimes in the first place. But
So maybe we're working on a limited merch line right now, guys, and maybe one of our products should be a t-shirt that says Google jury nullification.
Actually, you know what, Brad? I love that you just did this. I would love for our listeners to weigh in and let us know about merch wishes, because we are currently working on this. We're going to do it pretty limited to start out. It's kind of a lift, so we don't want to get in over our heads. But if you have great ideas or things you'd really like to see, let us know. And if maybe there's enough people that are saying the same thing, we'll pick a fan favorite for the merch line. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Let's get into today's stories. Obviously, we have to start with what is the largest story in the nation right now, which is the murder of Tyrie Nichols out of Memphis. If you're out of the loop, Tyrie Nichols was 29 years old. He had a 4-year-old child. He liked to take pictures of sunsets. He was an amateur photographer. He loved to skateboard. He was beloved by his family, and he was murdered in cold blood by agents of our government just a few weeks ago in Memphis, Tennessee. And I want to roll just a small clip of the video from the body camera that has been released. You can watch this on Twitter. The full thing is now available. If you are unfamiliar with the murder by police in our streets, then I would encourage you to watch it. If you, like me, have seen more of these videos than you can count, then maybe let us just sort of summarize this for you. So to get started, I want to roll a little bit of this clip, just the first couple seconds, to show just how aggressive and angry these cops are from the very beginning for what is allegedly just a minor traffic infraction. And guys, just a heads up, we try to limit profanity on this podcast. I know it's a turnoff for a lot of our listeners. I get it, but sometimes we have to air it just to show what's being said in these interactions. So you're going to hear a lot of profanity from the police in this clip.
You get your ass blow the fuck out! Get the fuck out of here! Get the fuck out the fucking cup! Damn, I didn't do anything! Hey, I didn't turn your ass around! Alright. On the ground.
We've also got another clip from this showing how they were giving him misleading commands, yelling at him to get out of the car, put his hands up, do all these things he actually had already done or was doing. And we will come back to that as to why that's important. But for now, just give that a listen.
Put your fucking hands on your back! Bitch, put your hands on your back for a break! Okay, stop. I'm gonna knock your ass the fuck out.
You guys are really doing a lot right now.
Bro, lay down.
I'm just trying to go home.
Lay down.
Man, if you don't lay down.
I am on the ground.
Put your hand on your stomach.
I'm spraying. Okay. Get the fuck back. Stop. I'm not doing it.
So, Hannah, I don't know about you. This was really disturbing. And the more details we got, the more alarmed I was by the whole saga.
Yeah, it kind of gave me a throwback to that really terrible case of Daniel Shaver that we saw years ago, I think in Arizona or Utah, where the cop basically plays this like really messed up game of Simon Says with him and then murders him when he can't comply with his very misleading directions. This was very much like that. One, you have 6-7 officers on the scene for a traffic infraction, all giving multiple commands and very like confusing orders. They're often telling him to do things he's already doing or can't do because of the position they have him in. Like in one clip, you see them say, give us your hands, but they have him, like they're holding his hands up. They are yelling at him like, get on the ground, lay on the ground. And he's like, I am on the ground. And then they'll say, turn on your stomach. And when he's not complying as fast as they want, they are aggressively beating him. So the New York Times actually looked through the footage and they found that the officer shouted at least 71 commands during the approximately 13-minute period before they reported over the radio that they had him in custody. And they said that those orders were often simultaneous and contradictory. And at one point, the footage actually captures officers saying things like, I hope they stomp his ass. So it's very like
wild.
Aggressive and wild on their part. Within the first minute, he does try to escape. But to be clear, they come at him with guns pulled out. They yank him out of his car. They have him on the ground. They're already having multiple people hold him. And then they pepper spray and tase him when he's doing nothing wrong. And then he tries to run. Like, yes, I would try to run too. You're being mugged by a bunch of cops in the street. And then they catch him again. And that's when the rest of the beating occurs.
Yeah, and what's unusual about this is, so apparently this was allegedly a traffic stop, but we've yet to find out for what, because the video begins showing his car boxed in by 2 other police officers. Then they rip him from the vehicle. Police immediately escalate the stop with their guns drawn. They're yelling. That clip we showed earlier. They have a taser deployed for no seeming reason within the first minute. They pepper spray him in the face multiple times, kick him in the face, struck him with a baton, and punch him repeatedly as he actually calls for his mother, which is, you can hear on some of the video, it's so heartbreaking, so heart-wrenching, and so disturbing. And I guess, some of these cases, these controversial police killings end up being controversial, and people will defend the police. Some people will say that the police were in the wrong. On this one, pretty much everyone acknowledges that this seems to be, based on what we know now, barring some insane revelations, a murder, really. A murder. But I guess one bright spot we can share is it does seem like there's going to be some accountability in this case, and there's certainly not always.
Well, yes. I mean, we have seen that 5 officers have been fired and actually charged with second-degree murder in this case. So that in and of itself is unfortunately a rarity. Often when police are involved in a killing, there are no charges. The lawyers, though, do say they intend to plead not guilty. 2 other officers were also fired, but charges have not been pressed on them, which is really an interesting detail to me because we really didn't get a lot of information about those 2 other officers on the scene of the crime at first. It was kind of just like, here are the 5 that did it, and we saw their faces, but then it kind of started coming out as the body camera footage was released. So like, oh wait, there's 2 more people that were there. And one of the guys that was not charged is Officer Hemphill, who actually is the one who initially tased Tyrie and who said, I hope they stomp his ass. So I find it interesting he wasn't charged. 3 Memphis Fire Department members were also fired. 2 of those were EMTs and a lieutenant who responded to the scene, and they were fired for failing to properly assess Nichols as he was laying on the ground, being practically beaten to death. He did live for 3 more days after this, but he died in the hospital after that. So yes, perhaps seeing some justice, some accountability, but still, I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. I think that it's very unusual to have a traffic stop where you have that many cops on the scene. Why? It's very unusual that he was boxed in from the minute that they are making this stop. There's so many oddities about this. To me, it looks like a hit. Nothing about this looks like a normal traffic stop or police interaction that escalated. It's weird from the get-go. So I think there are a lot of questions that remain to be answered. But fortunately, I do think we did see more action and more sort of unity on what should happen than we've seen in many other cases. The police chief did take action. They did release the body camera footage. They already have gotten through a grand jury proceeding in order to have these charges, which, by the way, guys, is usually where charges against cops go to die. Grand juries are secret. You don't know what happens within them. They are what happens before you actually have charges filed in some of these cases. And oftentimes we'll see things like prosecutors and police work to basically throw these cases in those proceedings so that they don't actually move forward. So it's a good sign that the DA does seem to have been aggressive in this case and actually pushed to get charges. So there are some bright spots, but as a whole, it's just the fact that this keeps happening. And I think that I want to dig into, there's a lot of angles to look at this from. I want to dig into a few of them. But while most people have had the right attitude, there have still been the normal boot in mouth people online saying, well, he should have just complied. He shouldn't have ran away. And that's why this all happened, which I think is not accurate. They were already very, very aggressive and being physically brutal to him before he ran away. And then after he ran and they caught him the second time, that is when they actually started like kicking him in the face, hitting him with the baton, punching him. It definitely escalated at that point. But to act like everything was going fine before he ran is ignorant. That's not the case.
Yeah, and even if it was, even if he could have avoided it through better behavior on his part of some sort, it doesn't really justify. It doesn't even come close to justifying losing your life. This idea that under intense pressure in this life or death situation, you didn't engage in the exactly perfect conduct that could have minimized the risk to you. I mean, sure, like that's inevitable. Any human placed in that situation probably wouldn't do the wisest thing in every possible move they make. I mean, how much can you blame the person? There are some cases where you're like, oh, wow, he like tried to fight the cops or he made some bad decisions, or this is just not one of them. Maybe running was a mistake, but it's certainly a human one. And they were clearly already being incredibly aggressive with him before he even tried to run. So it's not like that's what caused it. I think anyone looking to make excuses, it's just people have the blind deference to police in all cases. And then we can unpack why, but honestly, if you're ever blindly defending an institution or a group of people in all cases, no matter what, that's always wrong because all people are flawed. No systems are perfect. No individuals are, uniquely immune from the flaws that plague all of humanity. So some people are really just unwilling to acknowledge any case. But honestly, I got to give, like most people on the right who are often like police defenders or apologists, on this case, they were like, no, this is terrible. They want accountability. There have been other divisive angles, which I'm sure we'll get into, but...
Well, and I do want to say one thing on the body cameras that I think is really interesting. You hear police basically trying to start making excuses for their behavior that doesn't match up with the footage. Like you hear cops say, oh, he tried to grab for my gun. There's no proof of that on the body cameras. They say, oh, we think he's under the influence of something. There's no proof that there was any reason to think that. So I thought that was interesting. It's almost like you hear them trying to like make their case on body camera to sway whoever's going to watch it and examine their actions after the fact. And I found this thread from a former officer online named Katie Sponsor, who was talking about her experience when she was in police trainings. And she said, I've been taught to yell, stop resisting and drop your weapon after firing a gun because bystanders will remember you said it and their memory will automatically reverse the order of the events to make it make sense. Their testimony will support yours because of this. And I don't know, if that's exactly what was going on, but to me, that was really sus in the recordings, that they were trying to lay out some of those typical arguments you see that have been used to excuse police killings in the past. Obviously, you still have a significant number of people on the right, people like Candace Owens, who will try to say George Floyd was high and therefore he deserves what happens to him, which is just a bogus, disgusting, anti-human life take, period. I don't care if he was high, but there also was never any indication of that being accurate, and they'll run with those kinds of things. So I did think that was really interesting to observe, but I have been grateful to see that the vast majority of people, even people like Jim Jordan, who are usually very pro-police and anti-reform, have said, this is a disgusting, basic disregard for human life, and there's really no law even necessarily that could prevent this from happening. Now, I disagree with that. I think there's a lot of laws we could put in place that would limit this kind of behavior from happening, like taking away police's qualified immunity so that they actually are on the hook for their actions and liable for their actions in society. I think banning taxpayer-funded unions, which would include police unions, would lead to a lot more reform and accountability and police making sure they get rid of bad apples versus protecting them. I think making sure police have to pay settlements out of their own budgets versus taxpayers paying it when these things do go to court. I think all of those are laws that would substantially limit the amount of force we see police use. But I do agree that at the end of the day, this was just a total disregard for human life that you saw out of these cops. But what was interesting about this is that the normal angle that we often see when these killings get elevated is that the 5 officers who were charged with the death of Tyrie are Black. Tyrie is also Black. And so you don't have the typical racial dynamics that you might usually see. But that doesn't mean that we're not talking about race when it comes to this case. And many on the left have been making an argument that essentially just because the officers were Black doesn't mean that this wasn't a crime that was perpetrated against this man because of his Blackness. I want to roll a clip where I'm going to let them make their arguments. And then, Brad, I want your reaction.
I can explain it a little bit better. Okay, so anti-blackness is baked into society here and in the US, and Black people are not impervious to that. And so what people fail to realise...
So Black people are anti-Black?
Yep, this exactly. So let me explain. I know it's very confusing.
Nonsense.
So let me explain it. Let me explain it, Piers. So what people fail to realise is that when Black people have to contend with racism, they can end up internalising it. And that can result in low self-esteem, self-loathing, and rejection of one's community. And when you combine those feelings, which, as we know, are also referred to as unconscious bias, when you have those feelings and they are compounded by hierarchy and power, it can lead to an individual abusing said power and projecting their self-hate onto another. And this is why, in my opinion, why we see Black and white police officers killing more Black people than we do white. Reason why is because of racism, which includes internalised racism, Piers.
Right. I think that's complete nonsense.
You would, because you're a white man and you don't...
Yeah, so that was a clip of a Black Lives Matter activist on Piers Morgan's show. He's the man who you can hear saying he disagrees with this assessment. And I certainly understand why, at face value, that wouldn't make sense to someone. It doesn't make sense to me necessarily. And like, for example, CNN published this article saying that just because the cops are all Black doesn't mean it wasn't a crime based in white supremacy or in racism. And conservatives across the spectrum have been kind of clowning on this argument. And I do think it can be made at a very superficial level. And it's obviously true that the 5 Black cops were almost certainly not thinking, active racism against Black people in their heads. I'm sure they're not. They don't hate Black people, right? They are Black. Their loved ones are. Their family are. But that doesn't necessarily change. Neither are, I think, most white cops who get involved in these situations. It doesn't change the fact that there are racial elements baked into the system of who gets pulled over, who gets arrests attempted for what neighborhoods are heavily policed. And so I'm not sure I fully agree with the left activist take here, but I think it's not absurd. There's definitely some truth to it in a way that a lot of people on the right are failing to see because they're just on the surface reflexively dismissing it because the officers are Black. But I think it's more nuanced than that.
Yeah, I think this is where the left really drops the ball in all conversations on racism, because they, one, remove the responsibility of the individual, right, from the get-go. And I think that that's bogus. People are always responsible for their actions no matter what. But I do think that there are structural and cultural issues baked into our government and specifically into the justice system that do continue to drive outcomes. And to be clear, Black Lives Matter activists are not wrong that Black people are killed at much higher rates. They have a 2.9 times higher rate of being killed by police than white people do in this country. And that's interesting because there are, just by sheer numbers, a lot more white people committing crimes, a lot more instances where you might think white people would cross paths with police and therefore end up as victims. And yet Black people, who are about 13% of the population, have such higher rates. And that does come down to some things that you mentioned, such as which neighborhoods get heavily policed, who gets pulled over. The data is damning in all of these things. If you want to dig into it, I'm happy to send people resource after resource after resource. But in practically every angle that we have studied the justice system, we have found disparities that hurt Black people at a higher proportion than they do other demographics. And so something is happening there, right? It's not just a casual accident that this is happening. I think where the left drops the ball, though, is in explaining that racism, and this is how I grew up thinking about racism. I grew up thinking racism was someone running around with a Confederate flag, wishing that we still had the Confederacy, and just openly saying the N-word, or openly saying, I don't like Black people, or openly just very being hostile towards people of different colors. And to be honest, I've seen that kind of racism in the South. I've seen it, especially in older generations, where these things.
But it is way, way less common.
But it's way less common, and to be quite frank, it's really dying out with my grandparents' generation. That's really the people that I can remember in my lifetime hearing say those kinds of things or really have those kinds of positions. I think what's actually far more common when it comes to racism is it's not somebody like Nick Fuentes or Kanye West running around saying overtly, racist things, but it is what we would call subjective bias that is baked into your mind. And we all have it, right? And this is something that we need to do a better job talking about. I have it, you have it, Black people have it, where you have perceptions about people who are different than you that are sort of baked into your mind from an evolutionary standpoint. And it's not even necessarily that if you have these that you're bad or you're evil, right? The brain has to make groupings and associations. That's something that it has to do for survival, especially back in the olden days when you really were, having to live in a dog-eat-dog world. What the problem is that we don't talk to people about, one, having subjective biases, and two, how to catch yourself in it, right?
So just to jump in real quick, the one example that kind of opened my eyes on this is they've done natural experiments where they submit the same job applications, but on one, the name is Brian Smith, and on the other one, it is a African-sounding name. Mm-hmm. And everything about the resume is similar, and then they'll do experiments, and they'll show you're less likely to get an interview or a call back in the latter. And that's what we're talking about, subconscious bias, right? It doesn't make someone evil. We all have it, but we should at least try to be aware of it and try to. Look, I'm not perfect. I've had times in my life where a Black man walks up to my car or something and he looks a little sus, and I find myself locking the car door, and I'm like, hang on, he didn't pose any threat to me. He didn't do any, no one is perfect. We've all have these things. Black people have these things about white people, and how we all just love mayonnaise. No, I'm kidding. We all do love mayonnaise. That is true. But you know what I mean? We all have this problem, and it's not, I do think conservatives, especially the kind of old fashioned Republican boomer con types, they just don't have any nuance on the subject of racism. And I find far left and far right have naive and extreme and inaccurate ideas about modern race relations.
Nobody goes to bat harder for the government than a limited government conservative when you say the government might have systemic racism. It is the weirdest, total break in logical thinking I've ever observed. And again, it's because I think they have this knee-jerk reaction of well, if you say the government has systemic racism, you're saying all these people who work in it are racist. No, I'm saying there is subjective bias. I'm saying that there were racist laws put into place for centuries in this country that continue to have real-world outcomes and impacts. And it can be as minor as we've observed juries, and they're more likely not only to convict a Black person over a white person, we actually find they give stricter sentences to Black men who have a darker shade of Black skin than lighter skinned Black men, right? So
that's so messed up.
It even gets into the colorism aspect of things. And so, and that's in the Black community, right? The Black community talks about this all the time, but there is a lot of colorism baked into the Black community where they actually tend to look down on people of darker skin tones and prioritize people of lighter skin tones. And so these are subjective biases that are baked in. When it comes to policing, what those subjective biases might be are notions that Black men are more dangerous, that people driving a banged up car are more likely to be a criminal, right? You have these kinds of associations that I think can lead towards worse outcomes in the Black community when they have interactions with police and other communities. And that's what I think we need to be talking about. And that's why I'm not going to totally disregard the left's argument that there is still a racial component here, even when the police are all Black. But another thing I want to talk about is that these police members were part of a Memphis elite policing unit known as the Scorpion Unit, which I think is really interesting. Basically, this means that this started during the pandemic in a lot of cities. Let's roll this clip of Radley Balco, who's one of the best researchers on the justice system out there, talking about these kinds of units and what the impact has been of them.
In 2021, when crime went up in Memphis, as it has all over the country, most likely due to the pandemic, among other factors, they start this unit called the Scorpion in order to again, to sort of demonstrate that they're really getting tough on crime. The problem is, not only is there no evidence or data showing that these units effectively or even correlate with lower crime rates, they probably inhibit the ability to fight crime effectively because they undermine trust between the police and the communities that the police serve. In order to fight crime effectively, you need to have cooperation from the communities you're serving, particularly in high crime areas. And you need people to call the police when something's wrong. You need them to talk to you when you're investigating a serious crime. And there are polls showing now that, particularly in African-American communities, people are more afraid of the police than they are of criminals, and that's just not a good way to promote public safety in these neighborhoods.
So, Hannah, you're telling me that an elite squad of government employees is not actually that elite. This is my shocked face.
Yeah, I'm saying that weaponizing police, sending them into communities, and then continuing to hurt the relationship between police and those community members actually leads to fewer crimes being solved. Because, shocker, you need the community to trust and work with you in order to actually solve crimes. You need them to give information, to serve as witnesses, to provide evidence. You need them to even report the crimes in the first place, which oftentimes doesn't happen in these high crime areas because distrust in police is so high. So these were always a misguided idea. But I think as a whole, we have to learn the lesson that unless police can restore their trust in many of these communities, they are not going to be effective at actually solving violent crime, which is where they should be focusing their attention. The last thing I want to bring up, I have seen this swirling online, so I think it's important we address. There are many, many rumors circulating that Tyrie Nichols was having some sort of a romance or affair with a former girlfriend or baby mother of one of the police officers involved. I want to emphasize that nothing has substantiated those rumors as of yet, that they are all over Twitter. I think it's really important that we don't spread conspiracy theories or post information that's not true. I do understand why this is circulating because, as I mentioned, this case is so odd. Just from the very beginning, how they approach him, it does look like more of a hit on this person than anything else. It escalates from the very beginning. The fact that they're beating him, it's not like they actually feared for their lives or shooting him in self-defense. Like, there's a lot of weird aspects about this, but I think it's important we wait for all the information to come out. And the reality is a lot of this will be classified until the trial. And that's a good thing, right? Attorneys need to protect witnesses. They need to protect information in order to ensure that they have a sound case and doesn't get derailed. So if we want to see justice, we need to be patient and wait for those kinds of details to come out in the trial. So I'll leave it there.
All right, Hannah. Well, up next, we've got to talk about our favorite cranky old socialist, Bernie Sanders, because he's making quite the stir, because he's actually cashing out on an anti-capitalism event in a way that is honestly just hilarious.
Yeah, so nobody hates / loves capitalism more than Bernie Sanders. Like, he has quite the grift worked out for himself, where he has become a multi-millionaire in a capitalist system, basically based off his bashing and misrepresentations of capitalism. And this is just sort of the latest iteration of that. But when I saw this article come across my newsfeed, I laughed out loud. Like, an event to sell a book about how much you hate capitalism. The jokes write themselves. And honestly, they're not even that funny anymore because I'm kind of getting tired of it. Like, this guy's always profiteering off of his grift against capitalism.
Yeah, so we've got some reporting here from the Daily Caller. Democrat Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont is charging up to $95 to attend his anti-capitalist book tour. The event will promote his new book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism, and is hosted on March 1st at the Anthem in Washington, D.C. It's a nice place. The book retails for $28, and tickets go on sale February 3rd at 10 a.m. on Ticketmaster, which ironically enough, I'm pretty sure he's complained about recently as that company. So up to $95 for the good seats at this anti-capitalism event. It's funny to me because, you know, it's kind of a dumb shtick. Like, oh, socialist makes money. Like, they do have to exist in society, sure. But they don't have to profit quite so much as they do. And they should see that, like, their own personal success is actually a good example of why capitalism is an inherently good thing, right? Like, capitalism is all about mutual trade and like voluntary exchange. Some people, I don't know who they are or what drugs they smoke, but it is more valuable. They will get more benefit out of attending this event than they value $95. And so Bernie gets $95, which is worth it to him to host this event, that times however many people attend, and they get an experience that's worth to them that amount of money. So it's a win-win by definition. And that is the case for most things in capitalism, almost all things that are voluntary. And so it's just funny to me because this whole thing is ironic. It's an anti-capitalism thing, but it's inherently showing like why capitalism is good just in the fact that it's happening and working out for all parties involved.
Well, yes. And I think that this perfectly exemplifies the problems with Bernie's ideology, which is actually all the freak over the place. And we could spend a lot of time talking about this. But Bernie loves to tout socialism, right? And not like he likes to say he's a democratic socialist. But the programs that he points to, the things he wants to implement, look a lot closer to things that are in place in Venezuela or Cuba, where people are starving and cannot get basic medicines or toilet paper, versus places like Switzerland or Norway or Denmark or Finland. I actually did an entire episode about this on Base, about how the countries he points to that he says he wants us to model and that he claims are democratic socialist models. No, they're not. They actually usually rank higher on the Freedom Index score than we do in the US. They actually have higher rates of capitalism and free trade and free movement and all the things that are actually under our core ideology versus the US at times. And so he likes to actually point to the success of capitalism while claiming it's socialism, and it's very convoluted. On the other hand, he calls out things in the US that are legitimate problems, right, from cronyism and from big government, but he blames them on capitalism. Capitalism is literally just a market system. It basically says, I have this, you want to buy it? Okay, great, we trade. That is at its very base what capitalism is. Everything else that you're mad about traces right back to government intervention and impediments on capitalism and the free market. So the fact that he can't put two and two together here is why I just don't understand how anybody actually listens to this man and takes him seriously. He's a giant old hypocrite. He speaks out both sides of his mouth. Hardly anything he ever says makes sense. And it's kind of sad because I think his type is the sort we could come together and agree on the problem and actually work for solutions if he was genuine. But the solutions would be actually scaling back government and removing power from people who are profiting off of. And since he's profiting off of it, he's not likely to actually come to the table and work on that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I'm excited for this book. So here's the title is It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. Yeah, we know. You've made a whole career off that, bro. And this is the description according to Penguin Random House. Senator Bernie Sanders takes on the billionaire class and speaks blunt truths about our country's failure to address the destructive nature of a system that is fueled by uncontrolled greed and rigidly committed to prioritizing corporate profits over the needs of ordinary Americans. So the first thing that jumps out to me is that when Bernie first made his career and he was pushing all this stuff, he always railed about the millionaires and billionaires. But they've made these supercuts of him over the years where suddenly he stopped saying millionaires and now he only talks about billionaires. And that happens to coincide with the fact that Bernie Sanders is now a millionaire and now has 3 homes. And I don't begrudge him that. I don't begrudge anyone their success. But it's a little ironic to me that he went from blaming things on the millionaire and billionaire class to now just the billionaires. And then, it's just wrong. Like, we've talked about this, but capitalism has done more to uplift the poor than anything known to man. Free trade, right? We've seen exponential growth in income levels and living standards because of capitalism. And billionaires are not the reason people are still struggling. Someone like Jeff Bezos, in order to get rich, had to literally provide millions of people with cheaper goods and better services at the at their fingertips, created too many jobs to count. The economic benefits. One study estimates that innovators who get rich off their innovations only still capture about 2% of the total economic growth created. I mean, it's pretty wild that people demonize the rich as if they're causing all our problems. And in the cases where they are, it's exactly what you said. It's usually where they're buddying up with government to somehow rig a market or an industry. It's not because they're being too brilliant at free marketing and capitalisming, and that's why people are struggling in a certain area. That's just not the case.
See, I want to go back to something you said, though. I do begrudge Bernie getting rich because he didn't get rich off of innovation, off of how business people actually get rich, offering something of quality to the public. He got rich being a government leech, being a government cockroach, sucking off the public teat for decades and decades and decades, which is very typical of socialists. They're always trying to grift and live off others. He didn't actually do anything other than run for office, collect a paycheck, and then use his platform to start selling more of his grift. So
my only pushback on that is I agree with you in terms of the government's salary, but like when he's selling his books for $28, that's capitalism.
It is. But my point is his books wouldn't be worth crap if he wasn't in office and didn't have a name that he got off the taxpayer dollars. So like I would say, like, in contrast to the business people he hates so much who are actually having to create value and offer products and services that do improve the world, that do improve the economy, he hasn't done that. He is literally just a grifter.
Well, he has provided us with content to roast. and for that we appreciate him.
For that, I guess he is contributing to our bottom line. So,
all right. Well, next up, we've got to talk about the YouTube drama that's blown up the internet over the last few days. And for folks who aren't as online as me, well, let's be frank, they might not have heard the name Mr. Beast. But I will tell you, if you have children who are on YouTube, which almost all kids are, they know Mr. Beast. He is the biggest YouTuber of all time. He's just got crazy views. And he's made a multi-million-dollar company out of it, and they've started doing just basically like charity and then making clickbait out of it, which is pretty amazing. So this week, he released a video where he boasts that they cured 1,000 people's blindness. And then the video thumbnail is somebody seeing for the first time again. And it was a pretty remarkable video. I watched it. It made me smile. What they did is they paid for 1,000 people who didn't have insurance to get cataract surgery for their eyes so they could see again. So they'd lost their vision, or their vision had become very cloudy over the years because of cataract issues, and they didn't have health insurance, so they couldn't get this covered. And he came in and his team, and they paid for 1,000 people. And then all they needed in exchange was interviews and allow it to be taped to show their before and after. And it's this heartwarming video. I don't know, but I loved it. It has over 50 million views. For me, Hannah, it was so nice to see the internet, something blowing up that wasn't negative and toxic, but was actually like love and charity and goodness. How did you feel about it? I
mean, how dare they? No, I'm kidding. That actually is how a lot of people reacted, and it blows my mind. I thought the same thing as you. It was great. I love to see charity. I think, if you look at the data, the U.S. is actually one of the most charitable countries in the world, despite having pretty high taxes. We continuously are very giving people, and I think that capitalism enables that. When you have a lot of wealth, you can give back more, so it's cool to see somebody in his position using not only his money to do something good, but then his platform to sort of advocate for that kind of action. So that should have been the end of the discussion. Like, how beautiful.
But it wasn't.
Wonderful. This is excellent. But no, it was not. In fact, you have some comments here that people left in reaction to this in the document that are just mind-boggling to me. The first one says, "There is something so demonic about this, and I can't even articulate what it is."
Demonic.
What? Demonic?
Charity. Healing the blind. Demonic.
Demonic, yeah. I think that's what Jesus did, actually, not the demons. Like, you got this in reverse, honey. Super weird. Another person said, "I hate money because it makes people seem good when all they're doing is spending a little cash to do something. I bet most people will watch or see this and say he's a good person because the amount of money is so high and so charitable, but money isn't charity. It isn't at all."
What?
How? Like, I don't know. These people's brains are broken, honest to God. Like, how do you function in the world when you're at this IQ level? Like, something's off. These are the dumb drivers I'm yelling at.
Yeah.
This is them.
Well, and what he mentioned there is that that's the root of the backlash that the fact that this prompted backlash is nuts. But this did prompt backlash, including from the leftist socialist streamer Hasan Piker, who I will admit I actually enjoy. He's a nut job ideologically, but his content is very entertaining. But he said that while most people were happy about this video, it actually made him furious. Take a listen to why.
You watch the video, you go, oh, how cute and how nice. I watched the video and I'm filled with rage.
What's wrong with you?
That we shut off access to a 10-minute procedure because we paywalled it and decided that like some people just simply can't get it. It is so insanely frustrating that it's up to like one YouTube guy to like decide to make content out of it that people who are too poor can't just fucking see. That's insane. Anyway, sorry. It's just like a deeply, deeply frustrating concept.
You pay for my surgery?
Yes.
So I get what he's saying. He's not hating on Mr. Beast for doing it exactly. He's hating on the fact that we have this system where people have to pay for healthcare, and it's not all just free, aka pay for all of us and much higher taxes. But I think it's stupid, partisan point, and I think he misses a lot with this take.
Yeah, I think there is a lot to unpack there, but the reasons that healthcare services aren't free is it requires other people doing extensive amounts of work, paying extensive amounts of money in order to get qualified to provide you with that service, and they need to be paid. And I know what these people get at is that, well, the government should just come in and pay for all of this. And to have that stance ignores the very bottom line of why healthcare is expensive in the first place. Hint, it's the government. And secondarily, it ignores pretty much all of history and the operational issues that we're seeing in other countries like England right now that have socialized medicine that they want to bring here, and what that means for wait times, what that means for ability to actually access basic services. It's why you have such an industry of people leaving those countries and coming here to get procedures.
I'm sure you could get on a wait list for this surgery in one of those countries.
It's free, but you might die before you get it. Like, it's just so ignorant, and it really isn't hard to know these things. It amazes me, people of the internet right there at the tip of their fingers, and yet they remain totally ignorant about very basic operational practices and issues in these other systems. It's not hard to find this information out if you're actually looking for it, but I think a lot of these people, they're not serious policymakers, right? And this is why these people are YouTubers and like haven't ever actually probably worked on policy, because it is nuanced, it is difficult to unpack, and there are a lot of things going on that you have to consider when you dig into this. And again, if you're not somebody who's looking for the root cause of problems, you're going to be really bad at setting policies to address them, because you're going to go for easy, knee-jerk sort of emotional reactions, and those are usually not the right ways of actually achieving your end goals. The end goal here should be, why is healthcare so expensive in this country that many people cannot afford it without insurance? Why do people still not have insurance when allegedly that's what we're paying for under Obamacare now? There's several things to think about here, and we can get into that, but I think that's my initial gut reaction when I hear this kind of take.
Yeah, the point you just made is so key. We already have, quote unquote, free healthcare for tons of people in this country between Medicaid and Medicare, both of which cover cataract surgery when it is medically necessary, such as these cases that were in this video. These people are uninsured, which we were told isn't going to happen because we have Obamacare. We have all these programs, yet somehow they still can't. So either they're not poor, and so they don't qualify for Medicaid, or they can't participate in the Obamacare exchanges because they're so expensive and broken and dysfunctional, even though we were told that would fix it, that they don't have health insurance and that covers this, and they couldn't get this surgery until somebody came in and helped them out, which guess what? Hasan Piker's also a multimillionaire. He could do something like this, and I haven't seen him. I would love to see him do that, but he would rather talk about how the government should come in and make it free. And look, it could, but that's not really the root of cause of the problem here, which is people not being able to afford healthcare. And that's expensive for so many reasons, but it's not because we have a free market. In fact, we spend more on government spending on healthcare than a lot of these countries that have much like socialist systems, because it's that broken and dysfunctional. And we have, I think, almost half the country already on government healthcare of one sort or another. And yet still, all this spending, all these government programs, and we still have people falling through the cracks. I don't know how that is compatible with, well, we just need to do it harder. Because we do actually have free market alternatives here. Most of healthcare is based in price controls and highly regulated and subsidized, and it's enmeshed. The markets are completely controlled by insurance companies. It's nothing approximating a free market. However, one thing, LASIK eye surgery, which is something similar, but it's not like medically necessary, so it wouldn't be covered by your insurance, but it helps your vision. You no longer need reading glasses, whatever. A lot of people have gotten it. Well, it's basically a free market because it's not covered by insurance, so people just pay out of pocket for it. And at first, it cost tens of thousands and thousands of dollars, but the price actually decreased by like 75%. And now it's become super affordable. And now people are getting it more and more and more in this competitive market. There's multiple providers, and it's like actually functioning, and people can get it for low, affordable prices. And they can get it when they need it. And so many people have been helped by it. And, you know, I bet we could have something different that would also apply to cataracts, and an alternative system where these people were allowed to keep their money, right? We could cut their taxes. I'm sure all of them who work are on heavy payroll taxes. They're given over to the government for benefits they're never going to see in pie in the sky Social Security nonsense and all that. We could let them keep that, have a free market for this surgery, and I bet you a lot of them would have been able to afford it themselves. And when they can't, charity could step in, and that's a wonderful thing that free marketeers support. We just don't want your socialist healthcare nonsense with the people who prove their incompetence time and time again, making life and death decisions over our healthcare, and then starting rationing and all these disturbing things and double U.S. taxes, right? Like to pay for this, all this. I mean, I think it's a terrible policy idea. I also just wish we could have nice things. I wish we could have one nice moment of like the internet saying like, oh, what an amazing thing happened, without them trying to push an ideological agenda off of it.
Yeah, but I mean, you stumbled on to what I think people need to get wise to, which is that the health insurance companies are how the government basically took control of the healthcare industry decades ago. You do not have free market capitalism in the vast majority of this field. These insurance companies, the medical associations, the hospital associations, they all work to limit the basic supply of providers. They work to limit how many people can become doctors. They work to limit how many facilities can open in an area. They work to limit all kinds of things in that manner, which is through government regulations, so that you have fewer providers for your services. That means as demand increases with population growth, prices go up. You also have a regulatory structure that's put in place, mostly via the insurance companies. That means providers have to jump through all kinds of expensive loopholes. They have to pay people to make sure they're in compliance. They have to spend a lot more of their time on paperwork and government bureaucracy versus seeing more patients, so they don't make as much money as they're going about their day-to-day. We've seen in many models that cut the insurance companies out, prices fall. You mentioned LASIK. That's a great example. Plastic surgery is another wonderful example where you don't have insurance, and so those prices have continued to come down. I don't know the exact rate, but they are much, much cheaper now than they were even when I was born.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, hallelujah for me. Also, you have things like direct primary care, which is a model I've passed legislation on, that basically allows general practitioners to cut the insurance companies out, get back to direct patient-consumer relations with the doctor. You pay cash for most services. Not only is that much cheaper for the patient, but the doctors in Tennessee, where we passed this, they were able to see so many more patients and make more money per patient because of that, that it actually increased their ability to give charity care. They were able to give one charity visit for every 6 clients that they saw under these models. So that's absolutely the direction we should be going. Right now, trying to push more and more people onto government care, that's why healthcare is getting more expensive. Medicare and Medicaid are practically insolvent. All of us in the actual spaces outside of these programs have to subsidize that, because when providers don't get reimbursed the rates they should by these government programs, they pass those costs on to us and people who are having to actually pay for care in the private side of things. Same thing with the insurance model, right? We are paying to subsidize poor people to get insurance. That's making insurance prices go up for everybody. Meanwhile, the actual price of of care continues to skyrocket. And it will continue to do that until we go the opposite direction of what people like this are advocating for, which is more government involvement in the market. We need to get it totally out, and I think you would see prices come down, and a lot more poor people would actually be able to afford basic care because the prices would get back to real supply and demand. That can't happen as long as you have the government acting as this like crony middleman. So I think they're completely misguided, very ignorant of the healthcare system in general, and people who don't understand the root cause of problems should not be trying to suggest policy solutions ever. All right. Well, that wraps up that segment. Let's move on to our mailbag.
Okay, so up first we have Anthony. He says, great podcast. Since the subject of bisexuality came up, I thought I would say it does not always double your chances. Oftentimes, both gay and straight people don't like you or want you around, sadly. Oh, I'm sorry you've had that experience. I actually do know that's a thing among gay men. They feel uncomfortable with the prospect of dating a bisexual man because they're like, well, what if he ends up wanting a woman again? Or what if there's things I can't offer him or whatever? And I understand why people feel that way, but also it doesn't really make sense because it's the same logic of, well, they're foregoing other partners to be with you anyway. So it's like, but I'm sorry, that is a thing. I'm sorry you have that experience.
Bummer. Kay Martin says, hi from Spain. That's cool. Hey.
Ooh, have you ever been to Spain?
No, it's actually pretty high on my list for my next Europe trip. I'd like to see Spain, and
I have been to both Madrid and Barcelona.
For soccer?
Well, just for trips, but I did do soccer stuff while I was there, yeah.
That tracks.
B.44 says, best political duo, heart emoji. Oh, thank you.
Aw. Old A Grunt says, love seeing you on Kennedy, now subscribed.
That was from you.
Oh.
You're bringing us in, your TV appearance is bringing us in new podcast fam.
Bringing in the Kennedy fam. Love to see it.
Yeah, we love it. So this person commented, the way you fix Social Security is by raising the income cap on Social Security taxes. It's crazy Jeff Bezos is paying the same Social Security tax as a Taco Bell franchise owner. That, first off, that wouldn't fully fix the math. It would obviously raise more money to help the budget gap, but it's not supposed to be the point of Social Security. If you remember, you're supposed to be paying in for yourself. You're not supposed to be paying for other people. It wasn't supposed to be a welfare program like it's become. And what you're saying is just at that point, just why ditch the whole tax-specific model and just tax everyone to pay for it. Just be honest about what you're trying to do. And I think it's much more realistic to say that life expectancy has gone up. Let's raise the retirement age. I'm even open to means testing the benefits, which some people don't like because you paid in, you shouldn't get out. And I get that, but I just think pragmatically, multimillionaires don't need to collect Social Security benefits, and that would help the budgeting of making sure that for the people who do pay in and need it, it will be there for them. But the whole thing's a hot mess, and no simple change is going to fix it.
Hear, hear. Rodney Lewis says, yes, get rid of both teacher unions and police unions. Based.
Yeah, people have to understand what you can say about one, you can say about the other, but left and right tend to like one and hate the other, and it's like that doesn't really make sense, sweetie.
Nope, not one bit. All right, let's move on to hot takes. What do you got?
So my hot take is that people need to stop being snowflakes. The number of comments that I've gotten in the last few days, because I've been posting skits, and a lot of people like them. They're like, oh, your Karen impersonation is so offensive. Or why are you stereotyping white women? Blah, blah, blah. First off, I'm not, but you're also proving my point by Karening me about the Karen meme. We're describing a mentality and a behavior that can be applied to anyone, not just white people, not just women. I call men Karens as well. And then I've also getting this, I did a skit where I impersonate a MAGA person and explain to them why they should not support Back the Blue blindly. And people are like, oh, you did a MAGA accent. That's so offensive. It's like it's literally a TikTok skit. You're the people that complain about snowflakes and you're mad that I did a MAGA impression. Like it's supposed to be a skit and a joke. It's not serious. I'm not like, oh, you think they're all hicks. I'm like, it's literally a skit. Stop being freaking snowflakes.
What's a MAGA accent?
Like, back the blue, no matter who. Like, I did it like that. Like, obviously, that's joke. I'm not actually saying Trump supporters talk like that, but it's like, it's a TikTok skit.
They
like,
do kind of talk like that, though.
Some do. Not all, but some do.
You bitch, wear it.
Yeah, if the shoe fits. No, but it's just like, it's annoying to me. People on the right complain a lot about snowflakes and political correctness. And they're right. I agree with them, but they have their own version. They absolutely do.
Yeah, I 100% agree. People need a thicker skin in general. Like, honestly, people rag on me all the time, and half the time I think it's funny. Like,
so I will say this. I heard this take, and I don't agree with it, but I understand the sentiment. The take is bring back bullying. The take is like people are too thin-skinned these days because they didn't get enough bullying as children. And I'm anti-bullying. I think bullying is bad and very harmful. But there's like a little grain of truth in that now we're so afraid to say anything that might hurt anyone's feelings. And all kids are told they're special and they're unique and they're perfect. And it's like we do need people to have a thicker skin.
I agree with that. All right, my hot take is kind of still serious this week, but this is grinding my gears. I have been a champion of bail reform for so long and continue to be. And I think the officers in the Tyrie Nichols case being out on bail right now is a perfect example of that, where instead of saying, basically, before you go to trial, if you're going to be held without bail, the question should be, are you a threat? Are you an ongoing threat to society? And I think some of these guys actually might be, right? They might actually be threats to witnesses who might be involved in the case. There's no reason these guys should be out on bail. Meanwhile, somebody who's poor and can't afford to get a bond or can't make their bail can be held almost indefinitely before their trial, which brings all kinds of economic ruin to those people. And it's just a very messed up system. And I'm really tired of many on the right completely misconstruing what bail reform is and acting like, oh, people want bail reform, want to let dangerous people on the streets. No, the current system puts dangerous people back on the streets as long as they have money to pay bail. There should be no cash money bail. It should be a question of, are you a threat? Are you a risk? And if you are, then you should not be released and you should get a speedy trial so that you're not held before your conviction for long. But like, that should be the question. And if you're not a threat, you're not a risk, then you should be out and just expected to show up for your court date. I agree.
Cash bail has always struck me as messed up, that two people could do the same thing and one gets to go home and one languishes in jail because of how much money they have.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, guys. Well, that's a wrap. Be sure to leave us a comment, weigh in on the merch. We'll see you next week. And until then, stay based.